The madness has begun. Today we're reacting to the first game of NFL Week 18 in a week that's going to be highlighted by different playoff implications, scenarios, and a lot of madness overall. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers defeat the Baltimore Ravens 17-10 to remain alive in the AFC playoff hunt. Mason Rudolph on the day, 18 of 20, 152 yards, and 1 touchdown. Najee Harris on the day, 26 carries, 112 yards, and 1 touchdown. Going to the flip side, Tyler Huntley, 15 of 28, 146 yards, and a touchdown thrown in there. The rushing total for the running back tandem of the Baltimore Ravens, 25 carries, 106 yards. Now, just to dive into some of these things for the Pittsburgh Steelers, some of the biggest takeaways, I think there's two ways that you obviously know you can get into the playoffs. Either the Jacksonville Jaguars have to lose to the Tennessee Titans or the Buffalo Bills have to lose to the Miami Dolphins. Now, I think also kind of a hidden storyline within this thing we have to look at is Trevor Lawrence going to play or not versus the Tennessee Titans. That's a big factor in that. But for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think they handled this the proper way. When I'm looking at this, if my playoff chances are indicative of another team's performance, I just want to handle my business first. I think by the Pittsburgh Steelers handling their business versus the Baltimore Ravens, albeit Baltimore Ravens had a lot of guys who did not play in this football game, but still, you have to go out there. You have a job to get done, and the Pittsburgh Steelers got it done. So with that being said, now they're in a situation where tomorrow, you can just go watch the Jacksonville game. You can just go watch the Buffalo Bills versus Dolphins game and understand that now you handled your business. So we have to see what goes and falls in line, what falls in place, but you still have a glimpse of hope you see by the title and thumbnail. That's why we say that. Now, also talking about what happened on the football field, I think even if the Pittsburgh Steelers, now if the Jacksonville Jaguars lose, if the Buffalo Bills lose, I think this is a team that if they get into the playoffs, we have to look at some of the things that they did in this game versus the Ravens. I thought they ran the ball extremely well. I was kind of frustrated in this game because times where they got stagnant, they didn't continue to run the football. They got into the passing game in situations where they didn't have to. I go to the end of the first half. That's a situation where you're in field goal range. Now Mason Rudolph gets a strip sack in a situation where you could have ran the football, get a field goal. Now you're going to halftime 10-7. Situations where you get a touchdown drive early on in the game, 12 plays, 76 yards. You took 7 minutes and 32 seconds off of the clock. So I look at drives like that and I'm saying, okay, we get Jalen Warren involved. We get Najee Harris involved. And then you go get a touchdown because you're dominating the line of scrimmage physically versus the Baltimore Ravens. Having to stick with that. Now, this was a game where a lot of things were determined by the weather. It was extremely rainy, extremely windy in this football game. So you weren't going to see quarterbacks who were airing it out. You weren't going to see 30-plus passing attempts. We saw Mason Rudolph, like I said, he had 20 passing attempts. Tyler Huntley had 28, but he was coming from behind in a last-ditch effort. So this was a game where both teams were trying to run the football. And if you're looking at for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a lot of the things that they did when they were successful getting those guys downhill. Now, we know the combination. Najee, he's more of the downhill vertical runner in those power schemes. We want to get this guy into those gaps. We want to lean on Isaac Seumalo, some of the guys on the offensive line, and now we're in a situation where we can run the football, let him break tackles, let him drag guys for first down yardage. And I think they did that extremely well tonight, like I said. And then you look at a passing game, a lot of the things they did now, I think with Mason Rudolph, he had an extremely good game. Although he only went 18 of 20, what he couldn't do in this game because of the rain, because of the wind, all the different things, you can't turn the football over. Now, you had no interceptions, and of course, you had the fumbles. That's one thing I will say with the exchange. And when you talk about play calling, that plays into it. We can't run all these tall scraps. We can't run these pitches and these handoffs in certain situations where we understand maybe we won't have a clean exchange. If it's extremely sunny or if we're playing in a dome, I can toss the ball, jet sweep. I can do all of these different exotic play calls because the exchange will work beautifully. But in a situation like this, I think that got him into trouble a little bit. Obviously, though, one thing I'll say is Diontae Johnson leaning on him. George Pickens had no catches in this game, but for him to understand the biggest thing in this game is to keep our glimpse of hope alive and have Diontae Johnson, if he's the hot hand, continue to feed him. 4 catches, 89 yards on the day, highlighted by a 71-yard touchdown. We're going to lean into that. George Pickens, I know you're probably going to have a big-time game if the Pittsburgh Steelers make the playoffs. So he understands what the bigger goal was, what the team was trying to do in this situation, and didn't have any problems with it. That's a great development factor we see for him. And I think defensively going to it, you have a lot of things where you were able to hold the Baltimore Ravens to not what they wanted to do. We know this is a team that leans on the running game, and when you have no Lamar Jackson, you have no Odell Zay Flowers, now you're going to try to run the ball with Justice Hill, with Gus Edwards. So I think for them to only have around 100 yards in the rushing game, where they probably wanted to get up to 150, 170, maybe even crack 200 with Tyler Huntley at quarterback, that's just going to show what the front seven is doing. Cam Hayward, Ogunjobi, some of those guys, TJ Watt until he got injured. So it's just a situation where defensively you have some guys, especially at the linebacker safety position, you're mixing and matching. You're trying to get healthy guys into the lineup. There was even Patrick Peterson playing safety. We know he was a long-time veteran corner in this league. But overall, just a great job defensively. I think some of my biggest takeaways when I go over to the Baltimore Ravens, figuratively, you had nothing to play for. Obviously, literally, you want to win every game you play in as a football player and as a competitor. But figuratively, I mean, this game didn't determine anything. You have the bye week. You have the 1 seed locked up. So get some of those guys healthy. Obviously, in some situations, you want to go into that divisional round a little bit hot because you're not playing in a wild card. But I think the Baltimore Ravens will be all right when I look at that team and I look at some of the takeaways for them. Defensively, I mean, we saw guys step up to the table. You had no Kyle Hamilton. You had no Marlon Humphrey. But it's still a situation where also Roquan Smith didn't play. But you saw Patrick Queen. We saw Justin Matabuke, Jadeveon Clowney. Shout out to him. He got a $750,000 incentive. That was just huge. When he got that incentive, he celebrated for about 2 to 3. If you watch the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He celebrated on the football field for about 2 to 3 minutes. I think it was a commercial break or a timeout break. But he was just sitting there on the field celebrating, dancing. And I mean, for a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, #1 overall pick, straight out of South Carolina, and just having this late season resurgence is a pass rusher at 30 years old. Shout out to him for that. I think that still is probably my Super Bowl favorite, a very scary team as you head into the playoffs. But like I said, when you look at this game, it was really more about the Pittsburgh Steelers. A must-win opportunity in a must-win situation. They went in there. They got the job done. So hats off to them for that. TJ Watt. Now, I want to see what the timeline is and actually what the true diagnosis is on the injury for TJ Watt, because it was a situation where you're sitting there, you're really calm because it's kind of the end of the play, you're backing off in coverage, and then you have one of your teammates run into you. And we saw it as soon as he got the hit. It's just a situation where if you're calm and you're in a resting position and you have a sudden hit or a sudden movement like that, that's why we see those sudden movement injuries, because he's calm, he's in a resting state. Now his teammate runs into him full speed, and this is a situation where, okay, now we have that sudden tweak, that sudden movement. And then he went into the locker room out of the game. It is a knee injury, and I believe it is an MCL, but we're going to see just how severe the injury is in the coming time pretty soon. So I want to know what you guys think about this game. Pittsburgh Steelers keeping their glimpse of hope alive, heading into the playoffs. Big time win over the Baltimore Ravens, and we're going to see what beholds in the future. Thank you for watching. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And now,